Hello, everyone. As usual, my name is Cody DeArkland. I work for Kong. I focus on service mesh, and you're hanging out with us on Kong Builders. This is, I want to say, the third or the fourth stream that we're doing for Kong Builders. So it's been a pretty fun series so far to get into service mesh and show how in Kuma and Kong Mesh we build some cool stuff. Just a couple of kind of housekeeping items. I have multiple monitors going on, so when you see me look over here, I'm looking at the Q&A stuff and trying to keep track of people asking questions along the way. This is streaming on YouTube. It's streaming on LinkedIn. I think it's also streaming on Twitter as well. So we're trying to make sure that we're coming to the mediums that matter to you. So if there are other places you'd like to see the stream going, feel free to drop that in the chat. As usual, I have some background people helping me out. Taryn's helping me manage the stream. So as always, thank you to her for helping me land this as well as possible. So today we're going to jump in pretty quickly here and play with, we're going to resolve some problems we had last time with traffic permissions. So we were trying to do some traffic permission stuff in the application, and I failed at getting it working right, but I figured out what was wrong. Sometimes it's harder to do this stuff live and keep your thought process straight. So I figured out what I was doing wrong. We're going to jump in there. We're going to play with that and kind of show traffic permissions working correctly. And then we're going to move on to observability, and we're going to show how Kuma and Kong Mesh have this entire suite of observability stuff built into it, and how we can start to use that to play around with seeing how traffic is performing inside of the environment. So it's going to be a fun one. As usual, we like this to be as interactive as possible. I try to keep kind of Twitter up on the side and answer things as they come through. Taryn's also managing Q&A, so she will pop questions up on my screen if they come up. I missed a few last time, it turns out, so I don't want to do that again. So please ask questions about anything, even if it's not on the topic we're covering. It's good for us to just have some good back and forth dialogue as to kind of what's happening in this environment. As a side note, if anybody ever wants to participate in these, any people who've been watching these want to jump in and be able to talk live with me, certainly open to that for future streams. So if anybody has any desire to be a part of this, I'd be super open to that. But let's jump in and start playing, unless there's any immediate questions, which I've been keeping an eye on the chat, and I haven't seen anything come through yet. Just double checking. Yeah, so if there's any kind of out of the gate questions, things that are kind of standing out in your mind, or things you would really like to see in this, drop those in so I can make sure to put a bookmark on that and we can jump into it. With that being said, I am going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right. So a couple things setting the stage. I'm in my, this is the kind of app directory that we've been playing with for various parts of this demo. So I've got an application that's deployed out inside my environment. If we do cluster info for the Kubernetes cluster we're working against, you'll see that we're working against a cluster that's in AWS. So we're using Amazon EKS for this environment. Right now, we're running in a single mesh configuration, so a single zone configuration. We've talked about this a lot over the past few streams, but just to kind of quickly highlight, in Kuma, we have this concept of a standalone mesh, which is just, hey, I have a Kubernetes cluster or a virtual machine environment, and I just want to run service mesh on it. We also have global deployments, which are multi-zone. A zone is kind of a logical segmentation of workloads. So a zone might be a Kubernetes cluster. A zone might be a grouping of virtual machines. A zone might be another Kubernetes cluster, and all those things together would be 3 individual zones inside of a mesh. We are going to cover multi-zone deployments in this series. We're not there yet. Wanted to get through kind of the foundation stuff before we start jumping into kind of spanning across environments. But that's something that we really focus heavily on in Kuma and Kong Mesh. So I want to make sure that we hit that eventually. It's just not right now. So let's go and take a look at what's running in our environment. So we'll do, I have a bunch of aliases set up for kube control. So KGP is kube control get pods, and I do -A to give me all in the environment. So right now we're just going to run through and kind of review the stuff that we have going inside of this environment. Our application's up and running, right? It's been up for about 13 days. So that tracks pretty close to the last time we did this stream. I think it's about 14 days. Um, if we look, we have our Kuma control plane up and running. So Kuma is here and going. We have our ingress controller. So our ingress controller is how we're getting into our application. It's got 3 sidecars, so or 3 pods running as part of that deployment. And what that means is that we've got, by default, the Kong ingress controller has 2. So it's got Kong proxy and then the actual controller component. The third one in this case is the sidecar. So we're deploying this as part of the mesh. So it has a sidecar. Just quick terminology hit. Sidecar is analogous to a data plane proxy. So in service mesh, we have the control plane, we have the data plane. Control plane is where administrative interaction takes place. So as we fire off API calls to change parts of the mesh, we apply policy. Those are hitting the control plane. The control plane is then pushing that stuff down to the data planes. Data planes are the sidecars, right? So data planes handle user traffic inside of an environment, and then control plane is more administrative. Each of these tiers of our application have 2 pods running as part of them. So one of those is the app, the other is the actual sidecar. So we can, if we do like a kube control logs against, as an example, there's nothing broken in here. Words are hard. Oops. If I do logs against just that pod, I'm going to get not an error message, but I'm going to get a bad request because ultimately there's 2. The front end and the Kuma sidecar. So if we were to look at front end, we would ultimately end up seeing some Nginx style logs because that's what's running against the proxy. If I clear that out and we do the sidecar, here we can see the sidecar logs that are coming through. So Kuma is ultimately orchestrating configurations of the sidecar. Our sidecar is Envoy. So what's happening is when we make these policy changes, those policies are hitting the control plane, and the control plane is sending that down to the sidecars over XDS. It's a protocol. That's how, when we talk about operating kind of service mesh operates in a decentralized way, it's because those Envoy sidecars are aware of all of those policies. They're receiving that configuration down and applying that to communication inside of their domain. That means if the control plane goes offline for some reason, it's still aware of the most recent policy push and is still able to function. So it operates, again, decentralized. We don't have that single point of failure. You lose administrative capability, but you don't have the single point of failure. So let's see. We'll do a get services and we'll bring up our actual application. So here's our Kong proxy. If we go in and hit this, I'm going to just grab that URL from the other window and I'm going to swap over. We'll drop this in. Cool. There's our application. Everything's connected. Things are good. Now let's start breaking stuff. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to open up a new tab and I'm going to go ahead and port forward into the control plane. Go ahead and bring this up now. Localhost 5681 into the GUI. Good thing to highlight, we did a recent upgrade to 1.2.2. So 1.2.2 was released. I haven't updated the Kong Builders environment to that. It's a minor release. There was definitely changes, new functionality added, but it's not something that we need to do immediately for this stream. Let's take a look at what we have in the environment today. Last time we added a traffic route policy. Oh, we're actually not even using that. We're using just the default policy. So this traffic routing policy is saying all traffic can route to all of their destinations. We added a new set. Actually, I remember now, we were going to cover traffic routing policy, but we slammed into the brick wall of traffic permissions and that ate up most of the time. So we will probably touch on traffic routing if we finish up observability pretty quick. So we have our default routing policy in place. That's all good. One thing that we don't have, or well, we do have in place, but it's wrong, is we had these traffic permissions set up and we were having problems last time. And for the sake of moving things forward, I reapplied the default allow all policy, which says, hey, everything can talk to everything. We have this other policy here that was controlling some specific parts of the communication, and this was actually the fix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this policy so that we can go back and properly set up traffic permissions. So we'll get back into our command line. Now, there's two ways we could delete these policies. I have the allow all policy in place, and I think if I go into mesh policies and I hit traffic permissions. Okay, so this is that gateway permission. We're going to delete this one. So I can delete using the file I applied with. That's one way to do it. Now, if I do kubectl get traffic permissions, all, you can see all the traffic permissions applied in the environment. When we're using Kubernetes as the control plane, so we're using that as the kind of the main control plane for the environment, all of these configurations are stored as CRDs, so we can interact in like a Kubernetes native way with them. So we can kubectl against any of those CRDs and kind of perform interactions. So in this case, I've gone in, I'd used kubectl to delete out that traffic permission. I see you, Taylor. Taylor's an old friend, great guy, really smart technologist in the infrastructure space. Thanks for joining the Taylor. It's good to see you, buddy. So I've got one policy left. If we go back into the application itself, everything's working, life is good. Let's make that not the case. So we did it one way. We deleted the file and it went through and kind of reconciled Kubernetes and cleared out that other configuration. Another way we can do this is kubectl delete traffic permission. And since we have allow all default, we can do allow all default, and that's going to delete out just that one traffic permission. Oops, doesn't help when you do an extra backslash. Now our application should freak out. Life is unhappy. Children are crying in the streets. Buildings are falling apart. Life is bad. We go in here, we hit refresh. We can see all permissions are gone. So let's start off getting this application segmented a little bit. Right out of the gate, we know that we're coming in through a gateway, right? So the gateway acts as the front door to an environment. This isn't a Kong specific thing. When you look at API gateways always provide a front door to an environment, and then service mesh is about optimizing service to service connectivity. Obviously, Kong has a stance in this, being that we're a gateway company. So we have our Kong ingress controller acting as the gateway. So that API gateway is a full-featured API gateway that has all of Kong's plugins as part of it. So we're using that in this environment. That's where the traffic comes inbound through. So when we start to craft our traffic permission policies, we need to make sure that we're sourcing from that first. If we just say, hey, front end can talk to APIs, we're never going to be successful, because ultimately, as a user, we're hitting the gateway. So let's take a look at our services here. All right. So here we have our some of our delineators on this actual application. So in this case, Kuma.io service, Kong proxy Kuma, that is an identifier that we can use to build our traffic permissions off of. So we will use this as kind of the source for traffic to allow kind of the initial configuration. If I hit a refresh here, this shouldn't work. Yeah. So it's failing because I've deleted all traffic permissions. I have no access to it. So first thing we're going to do is go in and turn on that gateway communication. So oops, that was a mistake there. All right. I started doing permission step by step last time. So let's take a look and see how things look in here now. Actually, what we will do is we'll use the previous one that we actually deleted, so we should have just kept it in place. What we'll do is go vim against traffic permissions. Cool. And for now, we're going to delete out this group demo app thing here. I'm just going to say the source is the Kong proxy, this actual service. So kuma.io/service, and we're going to use that service name. And we're going to match against, we'll delete this for now because we're going to do something with that later. Kuma.io service. We will go Let's see, it's front end, Kong, SVC 80, I think. Let's double check our work to be sure. Go into our services, internal here. We can see front end, Kong, SVC 80. So that looks good. If we go into our data plane proxies, we can see all of the different things we could filter off of. So in this case, front end underscore Kong underscore service 80. That's what we're using. You'll see I deleted out that whole demo app thing because that was something we were trying to make work, and I got it working. So we'll come back to that in a few. But we can also key off of other metadata. So in that case, I was keying off of group demo app. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to that in a minute. Front end Kong SVC 80. That's the namespace inside a cube. That's just placeholder for service, and then 80. So looking good. Our name is gateway front end. Everything looks good. So we will go apply F traffic permissions. And we will go and refresh. And life is good. Now there's something interesting that happens here. And you can't see it. I could go in and pull up the Envoy cluster logs and show it to you. There's a better way for me to show that in a few. What happens here is when we start to apply these traffic permissions, what we're doing is we're adding things and taking things away from Envoy. So in this case, when we add that traffic permission, we've added that policy. What we've said is, hey, Envoy, things that match these, make the sidecars aware of that. So what ends up happening is the gateway gets a set of policies that say, hey, you can talk to these clusters, and that cluster gets added to the available communication list. So it's interesting to think of the policies that are being applied in this way, because ultimately what we're doing is we're telling Envoy things it can and can't do. And that those policies are being translated into configurations for that Envoy instance locally. So we have front end going in, life is good, connectivity is working. Now we could start going through and doing this step by step. That's why I have that directory that is aptly called gate or step by step. If I come in and I do, let's go cat CD step. Take a look at front end posts. I could say, hey, front end can talk to posts, and if I apply this. We did this last time, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time stepping through all of it. In a few seconds, this connectivity should go green. Actually, it won't go green because it needs the Postgres permissions as well. But if I come in here and do clusters view, we can see that that's starting to work now. So it's starting to become aware of other instances in the environment and other places it can talk to in the environment. So we know here that posts is working, even though it's red. It's red because in order for this to evaluate green and be good, it needs to be able to reach all the way through to the database where permissions don't exist. So what I'll do is I'll come back. I'll grab post database. We'll take a look at that real quick. Now, this is where actually, this is good to call out. This is where we messed up before. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to delete out this second one because we're actually going to add it back. But I want to show what happened when we had the mistake last week. Checking our comments real quick to see if there's any questions that came through. Everything looks good. Cool. I'm going to apply this configuration here. Go back in, we can see we got green now because everything's going all the way through. Our user service is still red. So very quickly, I'm going to go and apply that users policy. So users policy. We're going to see things start to fail here in a second. So users is there. It's not able to talk all the way back to the database yet, but that instance is available. We're going to do one more thing, and we're going to watch it start to, the service is going to start to flap. We're going to see things start to go green and then red, and then the other ones are going to go green. It's going to bounce back and forth. And we'll explain why that is in a moment. User database is in, and now everything should come up in a second here and should start to flap. So we can see things are starting to kind of flap back and forth a little bit. it's not worth sitting here and continuing to talk through it. But we're going to get things going on and off. Redis is still disconnected, so that's a separate problem. We just haven't added the permission for it. What we need to do is we need to craft our policies in a way that group things a little bit better, because what's happening is these policies are starting to overwrite aspects of each other. And in order for the policy to be evaluated correctly, we need to add them all into the same, not the same file necessarily, but we do need to be a little bit more logical in how we configure the things that match. So we're going to start going through and we're going to delete out some of these things that we added. Delete user database. We're going to delete front end users. What we're going to do is we're going to go into that original front end posts, which is probably not a great name to use because of what we're going to do here. We're going to add in a new policy that also says match Kuma.io service. Wrong one, sorry. We want to add it here. So the front end, we know architecturally our front end talks to both a posts API and a users API. So we want to have both of these destinations allowed by that rule. So we're going to do a match Kuma.io service user service, actually user service Kong SVC 5000. Totally unrelated to Kong, but anybody who's watching and is a fan of Python and Flask, you'll notice I'm using Flask for the API, port 5000. Love me some Flask. So that permission looks good. So we're going to go ahead, actually real quick, since we deleted everything, we should be able to show that the user service just isn't getting anything now. Yeah, so we can see user service is not online at all. It's not reachable. We're getting nothing back from the API call. But when I apply this file, oh, what did I do wrong? Again. Cool. Life is good. Switch back in. Boom. Communication is good. So user service is up, but it's not able to reach Postgres yet. So we will go in and edit our post database. And what we'll say is source is post service, or if it's user service, you can talk to the database. User service comes online. Redis is still down, so we need to fix that. So post service can talk to Redis. So we want to go ahead and apply that. Finally, our app is up and running. All is good. All connectivity. We've got a good foundation of. Thank you, Marcin, in the chat. You called out the service, and I missed it in the comments there. So I should have been watching closer. Sorry, but thank you for calling that out. Everything's working good. We have a good foundation of Zero Trust now. Right now, if we add another application to the environment, there's no default allow that's going to say everything can talk to everything. So communication is not going to work. That's kind of what we want. We want our foundation of Zero Trust to be in place. But this is a little bit more of a I don't know if I want to say it's a complex policy necessarily. It's just that there's a lot of configuration files for it. There's a simpler way we can approach this that I'm going to implement now, and then we can move on to playing with observability a bit. You'll see my application across the board. I've added in this group demo app to pretty much everything. So all of those things have that group demo app component to them. The gateway doesn't, though. The gateway, because it was deployed via different configuration file, it doesn't have that label. I could use like kube control and patch a label in, so I could like patch that into the deployment and then reload the pods, and they'd get that label added to them. But right now, we're going to use a source of the service name or that group name reaching out to that group name. So we're going to make a kind of a blanket policy that says, hey, things that live in this demo app configuration, I can like they can talk to each other. Life is good. And it just makes it a little simpler policy to read, simpler to build against, and it gives you a way to kind of logically separate an application. We're going to keep control, get traffic permissions, so we can see all the permissions that we've applied. We are going to go ahead and delete the traffic permissions or front end posts. Post Postgres and post Redis. Once again, everything should be broken and sad. Yep, cool. Now we're going to step back and we're going to play with that traffic permission, the original traffic permission policy we're looking at. We can simplify this now by doing second match here. First things first. We can take this match out for destinations and we can go match group demo app. And just for the people who missed it, that pertains to this metadata tag here, group demo app. So destinations, group demo app. Excuse me. This might not work because I can't remember if that is a case sensitive thing or not. All right, so that's good. The gateway can now reach all of these things as expected. So we're able to get in, but we have red across the board here. What we need to do is we need to add a second source that says anything that's coming from the demo app group can talk to that as well. So we'll make one more quick change. Vim permissions. And we're going to go group demo app. And just like that, everything comes online and is live again. Interesting thing to call out, if we go in here, we take a look at certs, we can actually see all of those groups are a part of that cert chain now. And they're actually labeled here as part of those URI headers and subject alternate names for the certificates that are applied. So in order to do traffic permissions, you have to have MTLS turned on. And once you turn on MTLS, all of this stuff starts to generate inside of Envoy. So you can see protocol HTTP, you see group, demo app. These are all parts of that of those traffic permissions that we showed before, or part of the metadata that was available to pick from. So all of this stuff is available as part of the traffic permissions kind of API that we can work against. So cool. We've now fixed our kind of wonky. Let's go ahead and start playing now with getting our observability installed, up and running, and going. So when I think about observability in kind of a cloud native space, first thing I think of is Prometheus and Grafana, right out of the gate. I think about dashboarding. I think about the good visualization. I'm a sucker for a good looking dashboard. So I enjoy being able to hit that dashboard and be able to see kind of relevant data about my service or my environment. So we make that pretty easy inside of Kuma. I try not to use that word a lot because I think it's a bad thing to say on live streams that things are easy, because what's easy to you might not be easy to me. So I try to be a little bit more inclusive than that. But this one legitimately is pretty easy. Kuma control, install, metrics, and then we're going to apply it. Let's actually clear this off first and just hit enter real quick. And you can see that Kuma control install or Kuma control install metrics dumps out a list of all the configurations for deploying out things like Grafana, Prometheus, those core components, and has them kind of set up in a known good configuration state. You might want to integrate with an external like Prometheus instance if you're doing like multi zone, or if you have something built, maybe you're using like Thanos internally to kind of have more of a global scale. So all that stuff is like valid and in play. It's just a matter of how you configure or how you want to configure the Grafana instance inside. But if you do this install metrics out of the box with Kuma control, you get kind of a known good working config. So once again, we'll run this. We'll do an apply once again. All kinds of stuff is going to create. We get a couple PVCs out of it. Oh, oops. Always do that. Get a couple PVCs out of it. Life is good. But what'll end up happening is it won't work. So if I do a Q control get pods all, see Prometheus is coming up. So it's going to work. It's going to deploy. But when we connect to it, we're not going to get anything out of it. Everything's up. So if I do a Q control port forward against the other one of these, Cube control port forward against the Kuma metrics namespace, Grafana on 9999, because I'm easy like Sunday mornings. Grafana, life is good. Admin, skip. We have a bunch of dashboards built in. Again, these aren't going to work, or if they do work, it's not going to work reliably. If I go in here to service, there we go. That's what we were hoping to see. General unhappiness. Things are not working as expected. The reason for that is so first things first, we need to double check and make sure that this isn't been deployed out to a namespace that has the sidecar injection enabled, because if sidecars injection is enabled across the entire deployment, these are all going to get a sidecar and Envoy is going to take over their communication. So we need to check to make sure they're not getting a sidecar. They very well might be, and if they are, for the sake of shortcutting, we're going to just re-enable the default allow policy, just to so we don't have to go through and step by step enable every single bit of permissions here. But also, what's missing is our mesh configuration. So we haven't told the mesh that metrics are enabled inside of this environment yet, so it doesn't know how to get to where it needs to go to actually be able to collect metrics. We know that the data source is here. We're getting a data source out of the box. Save and test. We're getting a bad gateway. I think that I have the sidecar injection enabled everywhere. So we might have to just do a blanket allow. We can check that pretty easily though. Let's do a refresh here. Yep. Sure enough, we can see everything. All of those systems are in here. You know what? Let's do this the right way. Or at least a closer way than doing an allow all. And this is a fun experiment that I wasn't expecting to do. So let's see how this goes. When I look at these deployments and I look at these data plane proxies, I can see that all of the Grafana pods have an app of Grafana. All the Prometheus pods have an app of Prometheus. We can use our existing configurations and we can say everything that is a Grafana or Prometheus pod can talk everywhere in the environment. We can make that policy pretty easily, in fact. So let's go in here. This is the fun of these kind of more exploration live streams as we get into these interesting, how can we go off the beaten path things. So we have our overall traffic permission policy. It's called gateway to front end, but that's kind of a bad name at this point because we're going to totally change this around. Let's add in another match. Or match app Grafana match app Prometheus. Let's do a match of the same. No idea if this is going to work how I'm intending it to. Let's see what happens. In theory, the world shouldn't shatter. Life looks good still. Aha! It worked. So data source is working. Our bad gateways are gone. Now let's configure the mesh to actually be able to send metrics out to that place. So I have. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I have this mesh policy that we set up previously where we turned on MTLS with our backends. I've got a couple of commented out sections here just so I don't have to type it all out manually. Metrics backend is pretty easy to enable. We can actually see this if we go to kuma.io, explore our policies. I'm checking over to see if there's any questions that have come through. I haven't seen anything hit yet. Yeah, everything's good. Looks good. We can go down here to the traffic metrics section where we can see a bunch of the configuration items. And in a few moments, there we go. We can see the configuration for turning on metrics similar to what I have in the screenshot right now. So these are all the configurations. And then we also have some of the annotations in place that are needed for, there's defaults. We could override. We don't need to. We have the default Prometheus stuff in place to do proper scraping. All right. So life is good. We're going to go and apply that. Actually, we need to correct that because it's commented out right now. We'll pop into my favorite VS Code. One of my favorite shortcuts in VS Code is command / to comment in, comment out. So I uncommented the metric section. So that's in place now. Oh, it's not in place yet. But if I do a cat against it, we can see there. Let's enable that real quick. Let's just to show. I always use the phrase like a good magician. I like to show before things happen. Here's the default mesh. Metrics disabled. Apply. Refresh once again. Metrics are turned on. Now, if we go back into our Grafana instance, we have all of our dashboards here, different things inside the environment. We can go to the control plane. We can look at dashboards for or dashboarding for the control plane, right? So we're pulling out some information here. XDS is sending a bunch of configs down. So those are all working. We're getting metrics for the environment, which is awesome. Getting message exchanges from XDS, meaning that policies are being applied and synced down. Life is good. If we head back to our dashboard here, oops, didn't mean to go that one. Wanted to go to that one. This is where we actually see the application traffic talking back and forth. We got a traffic here. We can see the traffic. So let's change this. Let's go to front end on SVC 80. Go destination service of hosts service.kong SVC 5000. And now, if we go in, we can go ahead and log in, admin. Just did a bunch of posts. If we go in here, default service, we're just waiting for stuff to kick in. some reason it's not gathering up everything like I wanted it to. Let's just see, 80. Going to post service Kong SVC 5000. Scraping could still be coming online, so it takes a little while to start up. This was working last night when I tested it. Let's reload. Reason the only service that we're actually getting against is that. Oh, yeah, we might need to temporarily turn on all traffic after all for the scraping traffic to be handled correctly. Now that I'm thinking about it, give it a couple seconds here. It's nice we can start to see traffic coming through, but we're only getting metrics off of the Prometheus server and not the other ones. So those aren't coming in at this point. They haven't started scraping yet for some reason. So let's jump back in. Let's do a look here. Double check that we have the appropriate annotations on our deployment. So I don't see one there. So we might have to actually redeploy. Well, no. I think that that's incorrect, actually. I think that's supposed to be a different one. So let's step back one. Let's go. Oh, no, but it is correct. So that is set up right. Let's just double check real quick by reapplying that. Oops. So most of that should be unchanged. Let's double check. So I redeployed it. It's taking a second to come back online. Okay. It's reinitializing a couple of the services that were cycled out by that whatever I changed in there. So front end got a new pod. Post service is getting a new pod. User service also got a new pod. No changes to Redis. No changes to posts. No changes to DB at this point. Old one's terminating. Let's pop back in. This because we did this for our destination automation event. So now I'm getting the other version of this pod. So hey, enjoy the advertisement for destination automation, which was in the past. Everything's up and running now. Double check that traffic permissions appear to be not fully there anymore. So let's go take a look at that real quick, see why that's happening. There's all of our data planes in the environment. Should still have our groups. Yep, our groups are still good. I think I know what it is. I think that It just made this a lot more confusing. Oh, that's a weird one. We're gonna do a describe, traffic permissions, front end. So we can see where we've got all of our groups are still set up correctly. Life is still good there, like we would expect. We're getting our front end service still, I believe. Yep, our front service. Things are still communicating there as we would expect them to. This is an odd one. So it's not oh, I think I know what's wrong. Actually, because this is a different pod, oh, let's go ahead and fix this. Because I was doing a different demo, that's not the it's not the way it should have been. So let's go front end and let's fix this back to the version that we want it to be. Yeah. This is using an older version. Do v2. So as a just a little explanation of what happened here, in this demo, I used traffic routing policies to control how these services were reached. Um, there we go. So things are starting to come back now. Those traffic routing policies aren't in place in this environment because I was doing a different demo. So that was not why that was failing there. So now we've replaced it with one that doesn't use that traffic routing policy yet. See, everything came back up. Life is much better now. Now we have the dark mode of the application, which is not exactly what I wanted either, but here we are. And we also don't have the Envoy version stuff like I wanted either. So that is not the right version either. This is what happens when unexpected things come up. Okay. Fix this. We'll go back down to version 1. The cube control, get pods against the Kong namespace. We're going to do a wait so we can watch it start to roll out the new version. So that drops. This is coming back up. It's just taking a few to get there. That gets rid of the old one. Everything is up and running now as we would hope for it to be. If I refresh this again, we should have the light mode of the app that has all our cool Envoy graphics and stuff in place. Just checking for questions real quick while we have a good pause. Cool. Life is good. Fantastic. Hey, Stephen. Thanks for joining, buddy. I see you. See you in the chat. Stephen's an old friend and a great colleague. Awesome automation guy. If you need someone to help you automate stuff, that guy taught me how to code like back in the day. So thanks for joining, hanging out, Steve. All right. So life's good. Connectivity has been restored to the environment. Let's go double check and see what sort of dashboarding we have available now. Still not getting all of our metrics in place. So that's kind of a weird one. Do a quick refresh. So we're getting all the destination services. So that's good. But just out of curiosity, I'm going to go ahead and do a new incognito tab and start over from scratch because I'm worried I'm getting like a weird caching issue here. We are cruising up on the end of the stream. So if you have questions, this would be a good time to discuss them. That is weird. That is super, super odd. I'm gonna have to I have to look into this one and see why this is not grabbing all of all of the correct source services. Because it should be automatically grabbing all of those from the environment. So I'm not sure why that is exactly. So we'll have more things to troubleshoot on the next Kong builders to figure out why, or at least come back to you with why that was happening, because that shouldn't be. So yeah, this is a good point for us to pause and start to wrap up with any questions that come out in the environment. So next time we visit, we are going to we'll get back to playing with traffic routing policies. So we'll show how we can use traffic route policies to control the flow of traffic. When I think of service mesh, my favorite functionality is that traffic routing capability. Um, Error disabled. Are all of these videos meant to be watched in order? Yeah, so they are kind of, I don't want to say they're planned to be watched in order. They definitely follow a progression. So we started with kind of no mesh and we're starting to build on top of it. So we are kind of building up. I do try to capture kind of the main topics and the main concepts that are missing along the way. So if something pops in and you're like, hey, CODY just said some stuff that's really confusing, please ask the question. I like to go back and explain that stuff again. So yeah, it's meant to be watched in order, but you should feel like you can interact anyways. And there's never a bad question to ask, even if I think I've explained control plane versus data plane on every one of these streams so far, because it's just worth doing. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Don't feel like you have to go watch the other ones to get your question asked. I care more about interaction with the community than I do forcing you to go watch 3 hours of videos. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. Happy to have you here, though. Super excited that you came through. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the support there. It's never fun to have a live demo not work the way you want it to live, but it's also a good way to find gaps in the product, or ways it can be better, or ways for you to learn. To your point, so I'm excited to figure out what's going on here, because it's kind of a weird one. It's odd that it's grabbing all the destination services, but it's only grabbing the Prometheus server from here. Just pop in one more time and hit this. Refresh the whole thing. Yeah, so as we start to wrap up, good timing on the message there, Taryn, for the Kong Builder stream. We do this every 2 weeks, so in 2 weeks we'll be back again, and we'll hopefully, the goal for the next 2 weeks from now is to do traffic routing. It's to show how this was fixed and maybe start to explore that multi-zone configuration. So the webpage konghq.com/Kong Builders has all of the streams, as well as the future ones that are planned. There are times where I step out and I'm not available, so we have somebody else jump in and do like a gateway one. We had Victor from our developer relations team step in, and he did a really cool one on Kong Ingress Controller and Connect. Like definitely keep an eye on these. They're not always mesh related. Most of them are right now, but they won't always be. So I'm not seeing any questions pop up, so I am going to assume that we are all good, and we'll probably target wrapping up. Awesome. Cool, everyone. Well, hey, thank you for stopping by. This was fun. We got through traffic permission, so yay for that. We got the metrics deployed, but we ran into kind of a weird issue that we're going to unpack. So we'll look into this next time and see if we can figure out why we're not getting everything we want out of this. So awesome, everybody. With that being said, thanks for stopping by, and I will see you in 2 weeks.